idea just how deep Darkroom, the organization which broadcasted our town across the world, was rooted inside all of us, including my parents' murderer, my classmate since we were little kids, and one of Darkroom's biggest assets. What did you just say? He said it again, louder this time, panting through sharp breaths, twisting in his throat. His words were more of a slur, and I sensed his desperation to hold on to every letter, to string them together and spit out something comprehensible, despite falling under. Inside his mind, I was already aware he was crumbling, coming apart piece by piece, a victim of the screen in front of him. Felix Delacroix was giving into bleeding darkness, leaching inside his mind, and the man's words had been the catalyst, swimming through suffocating red, trying to pull him down. He strained against a malevolent force poisoning his mind. The figure resumed sticking 2 metal prods inside his skull, but the pain didn't mean anything suddenly. Neither did the screen in front of him. Shock value, young man. I'm sure our audience wasn't expecting that. Just like you. Really, nothing will break the mind more than the revelation that the life they think is real is in fact not. A certain environment was required for the project to work, and you were given a father and a brother. Attachment is vital. If years down the line you are suddenly going to mutilate them. When Felix let out a howl of agony, the man leaned back. I don't know why you're crying. They were nothing but glorified performers. The screen flashed to footage from the point of view of the attacker, and I knew exactly where the camera was. I saw a man kneeling in front of him, wide-eyed, before an arm swiped at him with something blunt, something which slammed into the back of his skull and sent the man crumbling to the ground. When he tried to get back up, the arm came down again, more violently, and it kept going and going until the growing pool of crimson on the floor was soaking the bottom of the boy's feet. I saw the perspective of the boy crouching in front of his dead father and pressing 2 fingers into pooling red before stepping over the body, glancing warily at his feet to see he was trailing blood across white tiles. His hands delved into the kitchen drawer, fingers wrapping around a sturdy knife for carving meat. And with a dance in his step, like he was dreaming, he bounced back into the kitchen, dropped to his knees, and called over to his father. Please, Felix panted, hyperventilating, pulling until his body contorted into an arch before slamming back down. The boy barely felt a third intrusion entering his skull. See? It's funny. Here you are in vivid clarity doing an act so nefarious, and you can't even watch it, the man said. Well, for our audience watching at home, what I am doing is what you may refer to as a modern lobotomy. But while I'm sure you know lobotomies are known to completely inebriate the patient, I am not doing that. What I am doing is pressing the pressure points inside his brain. The human brain is an interesting thing, but with practice, it can be tricked. For example, if I were to, project a movie of some adorable puppy dogs, your mind would react in a positive way. You would feel happiness and joy, because of course, puppy dogs are cute. They bring us joy. Alternatively, if I was to show you footage of you in a fugue state, murdering your family, when you do not have control of yourself, you will react in a negative way. He slapped Felix when he screamed, battling against the restraints. The footage continued as footage Felix prodded at the raw bone of his father's skull. But what I am doing right now is tricking the brain into thinking it is feeling positively. Observe. This time, Felix felt them in full force. Both intrusions, narrow metallic rods rubbing against each other. His eyes flickered, momentarily flashing to the ceiling before finding the screen once more. He stopped struggling, losing all control in his limbs.
Let me go.
His mental voice was a whimper, like footprints in the snow. I sensed his thoughts being choked by a darkness spreading through him. But there were parts of him which were holding on. Parts of him who knew he had his family and knew it wasn't his fault. Knew something was wrong inside his mind and was desperately clinging on to consciousness. But before he could cry out, that pooling black started to suffocate him. When the man quickened his movements, stabbing pressure points, he slipped, and those thoughts slowly became darker, less pathetic and painful, but a poison which was irreversible, tearing through him. When he did give up, his phantom fingers slipping from the mental anchor he was clinging onto, and his physical grip on the steel edge of the bed, I felt a suffocating wave come over him, as if he had welcomed that vicious sea of Fred on the screen to crash into his mind. His thoughts were nonsensical, a cocktail of memories of his brother and father, good ones, vacations, and small moments he treasured, before they glitched into their murders in full clarity. Vision blurring, drinking in the screen and taking it in fully, Felix's struggling wrists went limp. He thought about his brother and how the knife had zigzagged across the flesh of his throat in a simple jerking motion of his hand, and his lips started to stretch. Not quite a smile, but it was getting there, his frenzied eye movements coming to a halt. Instead of pushing them away, he welcomed them, letting them envelop him. I think he let go to escape, then escape from the pain and the thinking, the questions about his existence. He started to giggle, blood spilling from his mouth and nose, numb. All thoughts burned away. Before he came back to life, this time his wrists limp in their restraints. With unblinking eyes, he watched himself slam his younger brother into a wall and stab him in the throat before slicing it open, no longer feeling horror, disgust, and agony. Something new and poisonous was brewing. He laughed, just a single laugh, nothing else.
It wasn't real?
His mental voice was hysterical.
They weren't real?
The last real thought he had only motivated the darkness, and he kept going. The huh turned into a childish giggle, but tears were still staining his cheeks, and that confused him, because it was funny. It was so funny, the way his father had cried and begged, and his brother pleaded. These fakes, the fakes he had lived with for his whole life, who he had actually given a fuck about, and not real? This time, he watched in exhilaration, like he was at the edge of his seat, and as his body lurched forwards, I realized he was. The boy's eyes were pinned to the screen, and his lips were slowly, very slowly, splitting into a smile, which then became a grin. When the footage stopped, the boy let out a noise of disdain, like a child, like all logical thoughts had been ripped away, and he was left with the mentality of a preschooler. A second and third metallic rod entered his skull, and his screams slowly started to morph into choked sobbing, and then laughter. Pain giggles which racked through him. A vicious cocktail of agony, combined with that final straying thought inside his mind, set every other thought alight And then there was only gibberish. Gibberish I couldn't make out. Nonsensical words and questions and answers cracking his mind open. When his body stopped rattling, his wrists going limp where they were strapped down, I felt all he had been rotting away inside the dark, which had taken hold of his mind. An insanity blossoming inside his broken mind. Do you want to watch it again? The bed reclined up, and he was shaking, giggling to himself. The memory stone had darkened. Initially it was dim, yellowish, matching the boy's personality, his skepticism, and anxiety curling in the pit of his gut. Now, though, it was hard to see through a choking darkness which had taken over. "Tell our audience, Felix," the man said loudly. "How did that make you feel?" Felix hummed in a sing-song.
"Kill them,"
he whispered.
"I killed them, didn't I?"
His body strained against the straps.
"I carved them up. I split open their skulls, and I wanted to see what my dad's brain looked like, how he ticks, and what thoughts look like. I wanted to see them cut into pieces. And you..."
The sharp, hysterical bout of laughter shocked me, and it started to hit me that this boy had been altered beyond my imagining. His gaze found the ceiling, where a speaker was.
"You turned me into that,"
Felix spoke directly to the man and the viewers.
"You turned me into this."
"We did. But again, for the 50,000 viewers watching, how did it make you feel?"
"It made me feel..."
Felix began to hum a song, not one I recognized, more of a mash of random ones he'd come across.
"Good."
His hands flexed, pulling from the restraints. His laughter grew maniacal, and he scratched his face until his own skin was stuck under his nails.
"It made me feel good."
He repeated the words as he threw his legs off of the bed, and his body, swaying from side to side, slammed into the floor face first. But he didn't feel pain. When it did come in sharp pricks, it only exhilarated him further. Felix was well aware of the hole in the back of his head. He scratched at it with his fingers, giggling, before setting his sights on the man who had converted his thoughts to a deranged string of nothing. At first the man didn't seem fazed, though his eyes were wary. I don't think patients were supposed to be able to get out of their restraints, but with Felix, a thought clung on. The exact thought which had sent him tumbling into the abyss. It drove his body, motivating a shattered mind. Fake. His voice was loud in my head, crashing into my skull.
"I feel good,"
he repeated, wrapping his fingers around a bone saw which had been almost strategically placed on the silver table. From the look on the man's face, though, he had not been clued into this. The memory blurred for a second, like the boy was struggling to pull back from me and show me what happened. But whatever had entangled our minds was stronger. Our vision was foggy, or at least mine was. I had no idea what was happening, only aware of an intense smear of scarlet painting the scene. I was suddenly aware of Felix lunging for the man, his hands grasping around his neck and slamming him into the bed. I felt our fingers tightening until the man's face was turning red, then blue and purple.
"I really want to know."
Felix leaned forward.
"Can you tell me again?"
He cocked his head.
"What you told me earlier."
The man struggled violently.
"What?" You told me a secret,
Felix murmured in a sing-song.
They weren't real, that they were fake. I want you to say it again.
Again. His thoughts crashed into me, a relentless icy wave.
You...
The man's lip curved into a scowl when Felix laughed gleefully.
Your family wasn't real. They were performers, if you could call them that.
I felt what should have been agony and confusion, twisting into euphoria.
Say it again.
The man's expression contorted, and he cried out.
Get me out of here.
He tried to speak professionally.
Get me.
His words morphed into a screech when the butt of the bone saw impacted his temple. But all of the sound had been sucked away, including the man's screams when Felix dragged the steel blade across the man's cheek. It was at the back of his pained howl when the sound came back in a sudden wave, and he was screaming, struggling as Felix pinned his wrists down. I could feel exactly what the boy was feeling. He was reveling, intoxicating himself in the idea of hearing it again on a loop. My family was a fake. He wanted to drown in those words. The man, meanwhile, was trying a last-ditch effort to escape, his frenzied eyes eyeing the saw's blades. The man had gone from a professional doctor with a triumph in his tone to a sweating mess of anxiety, struggling for a way out.
Dr. Trenta, please end the stream. I think something has gone wrong. I did tell you the implant was not attached correctly. The others have told you multiple times. The boy's brain keeps falling to fully submit. He is a lost cause. You're working with a corpse. Delacroix is not suitable for the Brightwood project. He is a failure.
The voice over the intercom muttered. Does he look like a lost cause?
The
man's voice choked up.
Please, just get him off me.
You say that while being at the mercy of your, or should I say, our creation. You knew the dangers of working with these influencers, and yet you yourself chose to deliver the boy's treatment, even if he is a lost cause, as you would say. Felix growled like a wild animal and tipped his head back, laughing. When the words filled his mind once again, it was all he could think. His father and brother weren't real.
Get this animal off of me! Fuck!
The man's professional prose slipped once again, and he let out a spluttered laugh.
Do you know who my family is? We funded this project. We are the reason why you exist.
Yes, and we thank your family for their generosity. We did tell you they would be unpredictable, but you wanted the views for your stream to further your darkroom career and your attempt at making it as a creator, which is typical. You knew what would happen, and I think we need a demonstration in our first official darkroom video, which will, attract viewers. It will be on our front page.
Wait!
Felix? The boy felt the words like ecstasy running through him. He lurched back, still pinning the man's hands down.
Yes?
Tear him apart.
Okay,
Felix mumbled, his body twitching.
Do you want to play surgeries?
Felix's hand didn't shake when he brought the bone saw down on Ben's face, and red splattered his face. His smile only grew when layers of skin and muscle made way for bone, and the man's screams stopped. He kept going, slicing the blade down the curve of his throat, then his chest, hysterical giggles escaping him.
Felix, stop. I think that's enough.
The man cleared his throat. You've had your fun. Just as I thought, a surprising amount of people have tuned into your activity. You really are exactly what we envisioned.
He said my dad and brother weren't real,
Felix said, carving out the man's eye with his fingers.
Can you tell me what he meant?
It means exactly what you think it means. Your father and brother did their jobs as instructed. You, like others, have been here since you were a child. To take part in the Brightwood program, you needed a healthy upbringing, of course with our input when needed. We essentially molded you into the boy you are today. The boy who slaughtered his family. What we needed to know, Felix, is if those moral inhibitions you were born with were successfully cut out. And when we were sure you had done exactly what we wanted, you were ready for Red Room, where we would break you fully and completely. That is what we are doing. Felix hummed, and this time, there was no implosion of emotions inside him.
So, not real?
This time, he used the butt of the saw, smashing it into the back of the man's head until slithers of brain began to appear.
Not real,
he said in a whine. Felix's hands were trembling, and I could sense this overwhelming urge inside of him to make others hurt. His tone was almost that of a child, like he had mentally regressed to the age of 10 years old.
Not real, not real, not real, not real, not real.
Building emphasis, he was slamming the saw on shredded flesh and bone, no longer recognizable as a head.
Not real,
he sang.
So what was real?
This time, he pried open what was left of the man's mouth and started to hack away the tongue.
Nothing was real. All of it was fake. 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 Fake.
He was crying, but his mind was contorted and confused, and tears didn't make sense to him anymore. All which did make sense was slamming the bone saw down into the growing cavity in the man's head. It made him feel excited, exhilarated. If he did it again, he would feel something. He would feel happy, just like the footage of him killing his family had made him feel. So happy.
I want you to show me again,
he said in a cry, continuing to beat the bone saw into the man's skull.
Show me again. I want to see them.
Dropping to his knees, his head fell into his lap, and he was still laughing before he jumped back to his feet and turned his attention to the man's torso, plunging the spinning blade into his abdomen.
I want to see what I did to them.
He swiped at his face with bloody hands, still smiling widely.
The fakes. I want to see what I did to them.
He choked on a sob, a writhing giggle. Waving the bone saw in the air, the boy sang, before continuing to hack at flesh and body parts he hadn't touched.
Again and again and again and again. I want to see them.
Another voice took over the intercom. Someone, please, stop him. He kept going, cutting and slicing away at the man's bloody corpse, until shadows in white came to physically drag him away. When he was pulled into a different room and strapped to another chair, metal plates were attached to his head. Something clunky and rubber lodged between his teeth. Felix laughed. He didn't stop laughing, even when they filled his body and brains with bolts of electricity, which made him scream, his body rattling, his bruising wrists under restraints which became permanent. It was every day. The screen of red soaked him, and he laughed. A voice told him he was going to be okay, and he laughed at that. "Don't worry." The intercom's voice filled our ears, and it was much closer. When his laughter choked, becoming feeble giggles, before sputtering out completely. "This is just a blip, Felix. Just a minor blip. We'll fix you, don't worry." The voice continued, strangely soft, almost fatherly, during every session when his mind was ripped apart and pieced back together. "This won't be forever," the man had promised, and Felix, or at least what was left of him, had held into that for dear life. I was left in the dark for what felt like an eternity, while his mind became darker and darker, a cavern I didn't want to inch towards. It wasn't until a sharp prick of light pinpointing my vision that I felt lighter. No, the boy's mind was lighter. When another memory enveloped me, one which felt less despairing. This time, Felix was sitting in a large room, like a control room, with large screens surrounding him. In front of him was a glass of juice, or maybe wine, from the sour taste in his mouth. This time, he was playing with his phone in his lap, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram. "Felix," the voice was from the intercom, but this time, it was much closer. "Can you look at me when you are talking to me?" Felix didn't reply, far too interested in a video of a cat with a filter on its face. He chuckled, tapping the like button. His hands were slick with blood. I felt it wet on his hands, though it didn't faze him. Immediately, I sensed a change in his state of mind. Still polluted and poisoned from the Red Room, and his ultimate conversion, but more stable and somehow different. Emotions which had been drowned out by the procedure were starting to prick back to fruition, slowly. It was almost like the boy's mind was trying to fix itself. "Felix." Finally, he lifted his head and snorted. There was a smartly dressed man, smiling through a grimace, sitting in front of him. This time, patiently sipping from a beer. "It's not my name, asshole," Felix murmured. "We're in Brightwood, remember?" "Fine. If you are going to be a stubborn child," the man tapped his fingers on the table. "Kaz." Kaz. Once I had heard his name, I tried to pull from the memory, because knowing and remembering it was him, again and again. It didn't matter how many times they wiped my memory, it still hurt. Despite my attempts though, I was stuck. I was stuck inside a classmate's memory who was more attached to Brightwood than I ever could have known. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," the man snapped when the boy's attention flicked back to his phone. "Ever since being inserted into the program, you have become..." Felix's lips formed a small smile. "Relax. I'm not going to go on a massacre out of nowhere, you know." He rested his feet on the table. "Appreciate the slow burn, man." "I'm going to ask you again." The suited man leaned forward. "Is the implant hurting you at all? Because the way you reacted to killing Jessa was not expected. Did you feel regret at all? Because if so, you should tell us so we can remove the implant. Kaz Isaacs is a beloved part of Brightwood, yes, but he is also, let's say, weak. You have killed once, and your reaction to that kill has worried us. You were visibly scared. Brightwood residents are not scared. They do not fear death." Felix's gaze found his lap.
I wasn't fucking scared.
You freaked out when you murdered Jessa. That is not what our viewers want to see. He scoffed.
Are you seriously grilling me for not killing? I just told you. I'm going to surprise the viewers. Duh.
Felix,
my name is Kaz, asshole.
His hands were suddenly trembling in his lap, fingernails scratching at the flesh of his palms. Something ran from his nose, and he swiped it with his sweater. The suited man hissed out, "Is that blood?"
Yeah, relax. It's a fucking nosebleed.
Felix laughed, leaning forward.
I'm sorry. Am I like tripping right now? Where was this care and supposed worry when you fried my brain in that fucking death room and quite literally drilled the crazy from me?
Felix, the man's tone darkened. Tell me the truth. Leaning across the desk, he came uncomfortably close. Is Kaz in any way influencing your thoughts? We are fully aware of your sensitivity to our implants, but I must ask, is it hurting you?
Yes. No. Sort of.
Tears stung his eyes, and he swiped them away angrily. Because crying? Was he really fucking crying? Had Kaz Isaacs really cut that deep into him? Fuck, his voice echoed, almost a cry, a sob. He hurts. He's killing me. But I want him to kill me. I want this disease, him, to swallow me up. The word choked his mouth, and that relentless pain continued racking his head, threatening to elicit a cry which he had been trying to hold down. But his scattered thoughts continued, much clearer than inside the Red Room. With Kaz, he didn't have to think about anything else, about killing, and his duty to Darkroom. Not even his existence, a question which had been weighing on him for 2 years. The boy's mind was a heavenly delusion he was jealous of. Nothing existed but going to school and having friends and caring about if he'd made junior varsity. He wanted to worry about homework and the teacher yelling at him. Sure, there were splinters in Brightwood, which reminded him it wasn't a real town. And he was more of a performer than a human being. But the times when there was no killing, and it was just him in his bedroom, listening to music on the outdated radio, or hanging out with his friends at the skate park, those were some of the best memories he'd had as Kaz. Being Kaz meant not thinking. It meant being a version of himself he didn't think existed. Kaz gave him his emotions back, contorting his brain back to something of normality. Sure, the tooth was killing him. He had headaches which felt like his skull was being split open. But those moments when he forgot he was Felix altogether, when Kaz had taken an unyielding hold of his mind, a poison spreading through him, were peaceful. Even then, sitting in front of one of the main darkroom bigwigs, he could sense Kaz Isaacs close, scratching against his brain, almost like he was knocking. He was sure of one thing. When the time was right, he would let Kaz fully in, for good. Felix? Lifting his head and drinking in the man's face, Felix groaned internally, which was exactly what these bastards didn't want.
I'm fine.
Felix spoke through gritted teeth this time. He shook away Kaz's influence, even if it hurt that he was pushing away his humanity. or at least the precious splinters he had found himself with.
I've told you I'm fine multiple times.
His lips pricked into a smile. He knew the bigwigs liked that smile, the ones they wanted on screen.
Did my fans like me killing that girl?
Well, yes. They want you, Felix. Who you started as, and who accumulated all of them in the first place. Brightwood is your playground, if you can think of it like that. Felix lifted a brow.
Are you calling me a fucking kid?
No,
Good.
He let out an exaggerated sigh.
Then I'll rip half of the town apart. If they really want that, I'll start knocking off my classmates.
He held out his arm.
Do it again. Stab me with your shit. And do it right this time. I want a 10% pay increase too.
Holding out his arm in front of the man's face, Felix chuckled.
What are you waiting for?
I'm not falling for it, you know, the bigwig said. You are suffering from daily nosebleeds. Your rapid change of personality is noticeable, no matter how many times you try to hide it. I'm going to say this once, the man said in a murmur. If you are lying, and you put yourself at risk, and not just you, but a valuable member of Darkroom and Brightwood, I will personally take you into the Red Room and make sure you come out fixed this time, no matter how many sessions it takes, breaking apart your mind over and over again and piecing it back together. His eyes darkened. Tell me, you are aware of why you are here, correct? I know exactly what broke you the first time, Mr. Delacroix. Have you been experiencing blackouts? Because like I said, and will continue to say, that can be rectified with a brand new implant. Felix half wondered what it would feel like if he grabbed the pen in front of the bigwig and plunged it into his eye socket. Then he might shut the fuck up for good. Instead, though, he smiled and stood up.
Nope. In fact, I'm perfectly fine. And you, sir, are paranoid.
All right. That is a relief. I will put your behavior down to stress.
Right.
Felix clapped his hands.
Well, enjoy whatever evil plan you're working on. I look forward to you slicing up my brain. Again.
He left the man before stepping through automatic doors, revealing a girl strapped to a hospital bed, her eyes wide with fright, a vacancy which made him smile.
Peeker,
she whispered, her eyes foggy, barely clinging onto clarity.
You're an evil peeker.
Annalise Duval, my dizzy thoughts whispered. Felix took slow steps towards her, partly relieved that he still had her. To make him feel less, Kaz. He reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a knife, spinning it between his fingers.
What was your name again?
When the girl screeched at him before bursting into uncontrollable sobs, he chuckled.
Oh yeah, Doc told me I took that away. My mistake, but hey.
He got closer, his breath in her face. I think I'm like sick. Just like you. Super sick. Wizened. So if I'm honest, I have no idea who you are or why you're here. You're just a crazy junior girl who keeps being dragged in here because you're being too loud
with your craziness.
He prodded her on the head.
What I do know is that I made a promise to someone really special, and that promise was...
He dragged the teeth of the blade down her arm, blood trailing.
That I would slowly take you apart, body and mind. I'm pretty sure I succeeded in picking apart your brain. So as I said, I'll start with the skin of your arm, and then your neck. I'll strip away your flesh until you are nothing but bone. Maybe I'll let you keep your pretty face. After all, I think the person I made the promise with would prefer that. I do hold my promises after all.
Peeker! Annalise spat at him.
You're one of them.
He drew back with a sigh.
You say that a lot. It's kind of annoying.
The knife tightened in his hand, and he had a sudden urge to slice into his own skin. Maybe that might help dull the pain, which was the implant trying to turn his brain into soup.
Whatever you say, Blondie.
Bending over, he sighed.
You know, the doc's been talking about me being poisoned. Something about my implant taking over my brain or whatever.
He played with a knife, dangling it in front of her face, before pressing the blade to her flesh and starting to cut.
You made me forget.
The girl's voice cracked. There was clarity.
You made me forget. Forget.
Felix inclined his head.
Yes, Blondie. I made you forget. And I'll keep cutting away until there's nothing for you to remember.
The girl screamed as the blade cut deeper, until he had peeled away her skin and held it, dangling it in front of her face.
A promise is a promise.
Dancing back, Felix saluted her.
I'm going away for a while, all right? I'll see you later. Maybe I'll see you in...
His expression contorted for a moment, and I sensed that switch he craved. It came with pain, but Felix didn't care. It meant stepping back and not existing for a while.
In...
The boy dropped to his knees suddenly, a cry tearing from his lips. Agony writhed across the back of his head. I felt the knife slip from his fingers, and he exhaled sharply. It was like coming up for air, fighting with a body which wasn't his, and a consciousness which no longer wanted to be there. I felt when another explosion of thoughts entered his mind. These were softer, like warm water coming over him, enveloping the raging fire in his skull.
Annalise?
He whispered. Then his gaze found the palms of his hands, slick, red, grazing over his nose and lips where blood pooled in sharp rivulets. He took slow steps towards her, shaky on his feet.
Did I do this?
Felix, or Kaz, what seeped into control, was already feeling fear and confusion.
Was it the urge?
The girl lurched back, hissing at him.
You lie,
she sobbed.
You lie, you lie, you lie, you lie. You peek like them. What?
Mr. Delacroix. He twisted around, his eyes finding a man in white.
Annalise.
He let out a breath before his gaze found the knife on the floor.
What happened to her?
Then he was drinking in his surroundings through foggy vision.
What is this place?
His thoughts were innocent, confused. I could tell why Felix envied him.
Is it the emergency room? Did we get into an accident?
I could sense his urgency to help her, and he tried to, grasping hold of the girl's restraints and pulling at them, before he was gently led back, a soaked rag pressed over his mouth and nose.
I knew it!
The same man's voice was a choked laugh. It's the implant. It's taking over him. The man was strangely gentle as I felt our body crumple to the ground before his arms wrapped around our waist. We will fix you, don't worry. The man spoke softly. I will rectify this. I promise. My own memory slammed into me suddenly like a cue, like I was supposed to sense them. The memory of him killing my family and torturing my sister Annalise. I saw it all in the brightest clarity I had ever seen, like the memories themselves had been altered to be alluring, hypnotizing, and like Felix Delacroix, whose brain had been altered in ways I didn't think possible. The same thing was happening to me right then, because it didn't stop. The faces of my family, Annalise's pained cry and wide eyes, those of my big sister, played again and again and again. They were riling me up like a dog. When I came to, I was somehow standing in our front yard, a striking pain at the back of my head. My fake mother was standing with breakfast and had invited the friends she was talking about inside.
Hey Al, are you ready for school?
Kaz casually holding an axe, and Annalise with a different face. Outside the door, the paper boy rode past, waving cheerily.
Morning, Al.
Good morning, dear. Mrs. Jensen, who was collecting her mail, turned to me with a smile. The whole neighborhood greeted me, smiling faces and manic waving arms. Laughter echoed. I didn't need a faulty implant to hear it anymore.
Well?
Kaz's eyes were challenging. His eyes went straight through me, and I forced a smile. The urge was strangling my brain, telling me to kill him, to rip him apart. But I backed away. I had to get out. Like Charlotte, Allie, and Olivia.
Yes.
I managed to get out. I'm just going to get my things.
Well, hurry back,
Kaz said, and I heard more laughter. Maybe Annalise, the real Annalise, my sister, was part of it this time. He tapped his imaginary watch, and the laughter continued.
Do you really want to get in trouble for being tardy again?
The girl replacing Annalise was doing a good job of mimicking the girl's blank stare and twitching hands. I might have fucking believed it if it wasn't for her face being completely different. Even in my daze, I saw that clearly. Backing away, I smiled at the puppets with human faces, at performers playing my family and friends.
I'll be right back,
I said, laughter following me as I stumbled back up the stairs. I went to the bathroom and tried to escape just like Charlotte. They had killed my family and kidnapped my sister, brainwashing her and then turning her into a human laugh track. And now they wanted me to kill. They wanted me to go on a rampage, fueled by the memories forced into my head, for their entertainment. I had my fingers wrapped around a shattered piece of glass from where I'd punched the mirror, when his voice startled me.
And in the jaw-dropping final stream of the award-winning, I'm not joking, Darkroom program, a third L meets her doom. Or does she?
Kaz was sitting on the bathtub, still in his bloody blue gown from earlier. Despite his expression, he looked vulnerable, with his knees pressed to his chest. Or maybe he was mimicking Sim in the Red Room. There was something about his expression which told me that Kaz was somehow different, but I couldn't put my finger on it. He leaned forward, his lip quirking. Unfortunately, you're well liked. More than me, actually. You have fans rooting for you, which means they have different ideas for you. Did you enjoy poking around in my memories? I bet you got a kick out of seeing me scream, he murmured. I couldn't help noticing there were no bloody smears staining marble, despite the state of him. He cocked his head, swiping at his sweaty forehead, had floppy dark hair hanging in his eyes. It was like I was talking to a memory of him, the memory which had initially been plucked from my mind before being restored, when he had been dragging me through winding white corridors, a stumble in his step. He even had the exact same trickle of crimson running from his nose. Oh, come on. You enjoyed it. You can't lie and tell me you didn't. His lips quirked. You watched me beg and plead for my sanity, and still get my brain sliced up. The boy swung his legs off the bathtub and jumped up, stumbling a little before coming nose to nose with me. They want to see how far you will go if you snap and go on a murderous rampage. Why do you think they tuned you with my memories? Think about it. He clucked his tongue, and I was seeing a cocktail of both Felix and Kaz in his eyes. Felix from the coffee shop, and Kaz from Brightwood. It's almost like they're preparing you to go on your own massacre. I mean, I would too. Seeing my parents murder is bad. But what about from the murderer's perspective? Now that is entertainment, which will get the views. But you're downstairs, I whispered. Kaz's lip curved. That's what you think. But it's Castor and Pollux, dude. And when I stared at him, he rolled his eyes. It's better to, not ask questions. He took a step back, his gaze scanning the room. What we need to be doing is finding Annalise. I think she's just been transferred from the laughing track room to the red room. So if we want her in one piece mentally and not a brainwashed psycho, we should go now. How do you know where Annalise is? I have insider information. He nodded to the door. Barricade it. Now. There's a 10-second delay on broadcasting, so they'll be focusing on the rest of the town. He dropped to his knees, lifted the blue rug, tugging it up to reveal some kind of trap door. What? Kaz met my eye. They put it here in case things go wrong. It leads right to that place. You know where they made me? So we are getting the fuck out of here, and we are getting our friend back. He caught himself. Well, my friend. And yes, I did just call Annalise Duval my friend. Kaz sent me a nervous look. And your sister. A shiver slid down my spine. I couldn't even call her my sister, because that part of me who knew her real name and our lives outside of Brightwood had been cut away. She was just Annalise to me, which was both agonizing and relieving. Maybe I didn't want to know that part of her, at least not yet. Right then, I had to focus on the present her. And why are you helping me? I couldn't resist choking out. You're with them. Kaz lifted his head, his eyes darkening. Who says I'm helping you? I glimpsed a crease between his brows, a mental fight between two minds fighting for control. The glitter in pupils, and the camera lens entangled around his iris, his body trembling with exhilaration and excitement, which was the bastard who murdered my family. I could differentiate the two of them with one single look, while Felix stared right through me, seeing nothing beyond a victim. Kaz actually found my gaze. He was afraid, frustrated. His curled lip and the tension in his expression. The boy shook his head.
No, I am helping you. Obviously.
He blinked rapidly.
I'm not him. I'm not Felix.
He started to tremble, his hands going to his hair.
Don't call me that.
He was a loose cannon. A loose cannon who was actually helping me. When the door crashed through, fake Annalise and Kaz standing in the doorway, I took a moment to drink them in. Annalise was definitely a fake. Tangled curls intentionally knotted. Definitely a wig. Kaz looked exactly the same. His expression was pure, unadulterated Felix. When his lips twitched into a manic grin, I turned back to Kaz to ask how 2 or 3 versions of him could exist, but he was already gone. Not just that, where his fingers had been on the handle were instead mine. Pain rattled the back of my skull, feathering my vision.
Elle, what are you doing?
The fake Kaz or Felix leaned against the doorway.
We have a meeting, like right now, at the town hall.
He held up the axe, winking.
You know, final showdown and all.
I had a way out, which was a start.
Hey!
The boy's voice floated from under the trap door. Neither Kaz nor the fake Annalise reacted to it.
Did you miss the part when I said we need to get the fuck out of here? Or are you just going to stand there like an idiot and get caught again?
So ignoring the fake Annalise with unseeing eyes, blindly grabbing for me, I took a deep breath and jumped straight down the rabbit hole.